So we are now live on Facebook. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. Tonight's town hall is called Vote for Equality, and we'll be talking with Mike Ziri from Equality, Illinois. If you are joining us on the Zoom, feel free to ask your questions in the chat or the Q&A. Either will be excellent. If you're joining us from Facebook Live, feel free to comment below the original post, and we will queue those up for Q&A as well. Again, thanks so much for joining us today, and we'll go ahead and hand it off to Carla to get started. Thanks, Carla.
Thank you, as always, Kelsey, for making things work. Appreciate it. So in celebration of Pride Month tonight, I wanted to talk about how voting can affect our rights and access to services for queer people. As I came into adulthood while in a relationship with a woman, I began to realize how many rights I did not have. At that time, marriage equality was a dream, soon crushed by the Defense of Marriage Act. The ban on gays in the military changed to don't ask, don't tell. And my partner, who was British, had no way of legally immigrating to the USA as my partner. We've come a long way since then, but even though marriage equality gives same-sex couples immigration rights and the ban on gays in the military was overturned, in spite of the recent Supreme Court triumph, we are still experiencing heartbreaking setbacks at the federal level. And we have watched states continue to try to erode the rights of legally married couples to adopt and to both be legal parents of their children. Today, I have asked Mike Ziri, the policy director from Equality, Illinois, to talk about the progress we have made in our state recently and what are some of the goals for the next legislative session. So thank you so much for joining us, Mike.
Thank you so much, Carla, for having me and for inviting me to chat with you tonight. Thank you.
Yes.
My name is Mike Ziri. I'm the policy director at Equality, Illinois. Pronouns are he, him, his. And, for those who aren't familiar, Equality, Illinois, we're the state's civil rights organization for LGBTQ folks. We've been around since 1991. I have not been there since 1991. I've been there since 2015, so about 5.5 years now. And originally, hometown Springfield. Grew up, lived there, worked for Governor Quinn in legislative roles. So policy and politics is very much my passion. And, Equality Illinois as an openly queer man, from Springfield who lives in Chicago now, the organization obviously is very near and dear to my heart. And I love the policy work that we get to do, being from Springfield, I love going back to the Capitol, love passing good affirming laws, helping Illinois stay the anchor of equality in the Midwest, and be a real example to states all around us and to states across the country. And I love, another part of my work is just kind of exactly what we're doing right now, but in a pre-COVID world and in a post-COVID world someday, I would be with you in your home, having this conversation in the district. That's something I look forward to that I miss. I miss traveling to Carbondale and visiting with the youth of the Rainbow Cafe. I miss going to the Quad Cities, to Bloomington, to Peoria, to all over. And especially now this month, because boy, I would be at so many festivals right now, all over the place throughout the summer. But before we get into the policy space, I do want to with you ground us in Pride Month a little bit, because we did have a great celebration on Monday with the Supreme Court, which frankly I was not expecting that.
It was that was a good surprise.
It was a good surprise, and it was really important. And Illinois has had those kinds of protections for about 15 years now, so it's really important that we export those Illinois values across the country. But at the same time, we celebrate and we see Pride as community. We also know that Pride is grounded and based in protest. 51 years ago, the patrons of the Stonewall Inn had had enough with police brutality and police abuse that they fought back. And led by people of color, largely trans women of color, their anger, their rage fueled a protest that lasted for days, and really was the catalyst for what we now know as the modern LGBTQ equality movement. So as we celebrate Monday's Supreme Court victory, we owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to folks like Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera, and all those who have come before us and built the foundation of the world we live in today. With all of its flaws and problems, they built, they have contributed to where we are. And because Pride is protest, that also means we have an obligation to support those who are also being oppressed. That means that the LGBTQ equality movement, must focus on dismantling racist policies, ending police brutality. And we do that because Black Lives Matter and Black trans lives matter. So I just really wanted to ground Pride Month in that history of where we are and what we need to keep fighting for. Because you're right, we've made many great achievements in the community with marriage equality, with the non-discrimination protections. But we also know laws are only as good as their implementation. And so we need to make sure that there's fairness and equity for everybody across the country. So
Great.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Last legislative session, we were able to pass the inclusive curriculum bill, which I lobbied for, and with my son, who is in junior high, and that was such a wonderful experience to sit through Equality Illinois' training session for Lobby Day, and then have my son go with me and talk about bullying, because he's been bullied in school. He likes to wear his hair long, and at the time he wore pink a lot, and just because it made him happy. It didn't necessarily mean anything, and it doesn't necessarily have to mean anything. If you choose to adorn yourself in whatever way makes you happy, that shouldn't make you a target of bullying,
right?
Ever. So I certainly appreciated that experience last year. So what else passed last year other than the inclusive curriculum bill?
Yeah, so last year was one of the most robust and successful legislative sessions for LGBTQ folks, but also just in recent history, just the amazing, affirming progressive pieces of legislation that passed, most of which are now law. But I'll start with the inclusive curriculum law, since you started there, which actually the effective date is July 1, 2020. So it will go into effect for the 2020-2021 school year coming up. And really just a significant, such an exciting bill. It took two and a half years to pass through the legislative process. And it's a very simple premise that history should tell the stories of LGBTQ people and the contributions they made. So if you're teaching about World War II, include Alan Turing, the father of computer science, who helped defeat the Nazis in the European theater of war. If you talk about Jane Addams, talk about all of Jane Addams's life, and it's important to share that information because it allows LGBTQ youth. You talk about bullying a moment ago. Schools should be places where young people can thrive and grow and be themselves without discrimination, without harassment. And too often we know data shows that queer youth are bullied and harassed, and so very few of them ever learn about people like them in school. And so the power of learning that someone like you existed and had an impact on history is powerful. You're not alone. You're not alone. And then conversely, for non-LGBTQ youth, it reinforces the fact of history that diverse groups of people have contributed to society and built the world the way we are. And I want to share something about Alan Turing real quick, because that's history, the father of computer science. If you haven't seen the movie The Imitation Game, I encourage everyone to watch it. But he, at the end of his life, was put in prison for a homosexual relationship. Actually chemically castrated. He could choose between prison or being chemically castrated.
Yeah.
He opted for the chemical castration. It affected him mentally and emotionally. He ended up taking his own life. And one theory as to why the Apple logo is an apple that has a bite out of it is because Alan Turing put a cyanide capsule in an apple. So one theory is that's why. So I like to say we're all living in a gay man's world with our technology. But it's that history that in every field of science, like Dr. Sally Ride, Jane Addams, all these, Bayard Rustin, all these significant people in history and the impact, Lorraine Hansberry, the great playwright, Raisin in the Sun. There's so much history here that's been hidden. And, we, with our partners at the Illinois Safe Schools Alliance and the Legacy Project, aim to put this history, out there. As Victor Salvo from the Legacy Project says, we seek to put the clause back into the biography that someone thought was important enough to take out. And I love when Victor says that, because it's like, so that is a critical bill. It goes into effect. And if folks want to stay up to date, I'm going to put this in the chat. If you want to stay up to date on the progress, here is sign up at this link from the Illinois Safe Schools Alliance, and you will get updates, newsletter updates on the progress as we, go for implementation on the bill. So it's really important. And, if you want to see who voted for the bill, there's always.
I know who didn't vote for the bill.
Right. There's always that link, which is the link to the laws page. As it did pass, the governor did sign it, and it goes into effect. And so that's one important piece of legislation that we worked on last year. Another important piece, and I'm pulling up my notes here because there's a lot. We worked with Pride Action Tank and the Chicago Restroom Access Project, whose acronym is CRAP.
Yes, right.
Fine, right? But
I know.
They're amazing, amazing advocates who have been, Pride Action Tank and CRAP have been working for about 5 years now on affirming inclusive restroom policies in the city of Chicago. So we worked with them on a bill called the Equitable Restroom Access Act. And it's a piece of legislation that very simply says, if you have a single occupancy restroom in a place of public accommodation, so think like a bar or a restaurant,
right?
Places like that, or a grocery store, or any kind of public service facility, or a public building, then that restroom, that single occupancy restroom, should not have gender designation, but all gender or gender neutral or something like that. So it's a matter of just changing out the sign. And just a really powerful bill that provides safety and security, an affirming space for trans folks, but also older adults, maybe with a caregiver, parents with different sex children, anyone who might need assistance, using the facilities. So, just a very powerful bill. And that went into effect earlier this year on January 1. We with the Pride Action Tank and CRAP, we were looking at a robust public education campaign. Those things have all been kind of put on hold because of, but, we still think it's an important bill. Because simply, if it's a very simple premise, if you can't use a facility in public, it's hard to be active in public life, so.
Right.
It's a very simple premise. So that was an important bill.
Actually, could you update us also on the driver's license, the bill that covers the driver's license? Because that's another,
so that's on my list. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, great.
Yeah. So there's two parts to that I want to mention. One is a law that we had worked to pass last year. Another is a policy change. So, and they each tackle two different pieces of the driver's license. So, folks can correct the gender marker on a driver's license. It's been the policy now for several years. There are only, right now, if you want to correct the gender marker, there are only two options, male or female. So, piece of legislation last year that State Rep Ann Stava Murray from Downers Grove introduced. And we worked with her, we supported it. That's a good bill. And the Secretary of State's office supported it. And what it simply says is that, the Secretary of State's, the DMV, will provide the option of a third gender marker for a non-binary marker. The caveat there, and the governor signed it, it passed, the governor signed it. The caveat is and I'm, haven't looked at this recently, but as I recall, the technology that the Secretary of State's office currently uses doesn't allow for a third marker. So we wait for new technology, which is a few years off. And that's frustrating. But the Secretary of State's office has been great to work with on the process of the legislation. So, we hope to get to a place in the next several years when they can have that new technology and folks can get a driver's license with a gender marker that shows who they are and have authentic, an ID authentic to their self. So that's the law we passed. And on the policy side, we worked last September, last summer with a policy. So previously, if you wanted to correct the gender marker on your driver's license, you would have to show a doctor's note that you're on gender transition or some kind of care, a doctor's note or a mental health provider's note. But we worked with our partners at the National Center for Transgender Equality and to fix that because, frankly, folks shouldn't have to prove medical documentation as to who they are. But we also know that, in Illinois, which is a state that has great laws, about 33% of trans individuals in Illinois say that they don't go to the doctor because of mistreatment, harassment from their provider. So it becomes hard to get a doctor's note if you're going to be discriminated against when you go to the doctor. So the Secretary of State's office worked with us. They got rid of the doctor's note policy. Right now, if you want to just correct the gender marker, and bear in mind right now it's only between a male marker or a female marker, all you have to do is submit a declaration of, I think, can't remember the exact title of it, but it's a form on the Secretary of State's website. Fill it in, you take it into the DMV. I think there's a $10 charge, which, is still in effect. And that's all you do. You don't have to have a doctor's note. You don't have to get anything signed off by a medical provider. It's called self-attestation. This is what I want changed. There you go.
Right. That's so helpful.
It's a great policy. And we've actually introduced legislation this year to do the same for birth certificates. Because right now, birth certificate, you have to show a provider's note that you are undergoing clinically appropriate transition. And the same philosophy, the birth certificate as the driver's licenses, you shouldn't have to show medical documentation as to who you are to be yourself. And we introduced that bill this year, and it passed House Committee 10-3 the week before the COVID shutdown.
Yeah. So now it's just waiting. Yeah.
Waiting. But I'll say that we have a lot of support behind the bill, including the Illinois Department of Public Health, which oversees.
Wonderful.
So they've been very helpful at the department. And then, one more piece of legislation that we did work on last year that I want to highlight is a bill to, well, two bills actually. I want to mention both of these because they both significant, and one of them ties into national stuff, national issues. But one of them is we passed a bill that designates LGBTQ older adults and older adults living with HIV as communities of greatest social need. And what that means is, communities who, because of social isolation and stigma, have been, cut off from services, or there are disparities. And we know that disparities for older adults who are LGBTQ and older adults living with HIV when they access services in aging and just human services generally. And so it just means that providers of aging services need to make plans that include older adults who are LGBTQ and older adults who are living with HIV. And this is a really significant bill because Illinois is the third state to do this, to ensure that LGBTQ older adults, the people who, as I mentioned earlier, the people who built the world we live in, that take care of them, that they don't have to go back into the closet as they age, live their authentic self their whole life. So we are the third state to ensure that LGBTQ older adults are designated as a community of greatest social need. And we're the first state to designate older adults living with HIV as a community of greatest social need. So really exciting piece of legislation, and worked on this bill with Pride Action Tank again, the Center on Halstead, and with SAGE. And SAGE is a national advocacy organization for LGBTQ older adults. So just some great partners got this bill passed, really excited by it. And then the last bill I want to mention that we worked on last year, it passed unanimously in both chambers. A very simple bill, adding LGBTQ people to the jury service non-discrimination law here in Illinois. Oh. You can't be discriminated against in jury service. And seen in other states is sometimes folks are removed from jury pools because of their sexual orientation or gender identity, because lawyers may think that will bias you one way or another. And our philosophy is the only way you can have a truly representative jury pool is to include LGBTQ people. When I think of the jury service non-discrimination law here in Illinois, it makes me think of the Supreme Court case on Monday, because the Supreme Court case on Monday was non-discrimination in employment. So while we are making the laws here in Illinois as robust as possible, to be as protective as possible, which is why we passed this jury service bill last year, we know that federal law also needs to be, have those robust protections. And the Supreme Court case in employment is huge. But we also know that we also need to protect LGBT people from discrimination in housing federally, in public accommodations, in jury service. There's a federal jury service law. So, while we in Illinois make our laws as robust as possible, we're very cognizant that we need to make sure that we export, as I like to say, those Illinois values to the federal.
Right.
And one way of doing that is, we could have the court rule on every single area of public life, or the United States Senate could finally pass the Equality Act, which is
that would be nice.
National LGBTQ inclusive non-discrimination protections in all the areas I mentioned, jury service. It would codify the Supreme Court decision on employment, public accommodations, non-discrimination in education, housing, access to credit, and a few other areas. The Equality Act has passed the U.S. House last February, I believe, in 2019. And it is currently languishing in the U.S. Senate, like so many good pieces of legislation. But I'm happy to say that Senators Durbin and Duckworth are co-sponsors of it. We need to make sure that there are full protections at the national level as well, because we care about LGBTQ people everywhere. But we also have to recognize that LGBTQ Illinoisans do not just stay in Illinois. So folks need to be protected and have their civil rights protected everywhere. So I'm going to stop there because I've talked for a long time, and I'm going to.
That's okay. I'm very curious to know if you and your colleagues have any sense at all of the Supreme Court ruling having any bearing on the presidential proclamation about transgender people in the military?
That's a good question, and I will back this up by saying I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah.
I'm not a lawyer, so I and I also, even if I was a lawyer, I would want to tremendously defer to the legal experts who have been working on these cases. Our great champions at Lambda Legal, the ACLU, the Transgender Center. It's all the great champions and those and many other organizations. But from everything I've been reading. This Supreme Court decision could open the door for significant protections for the community in other areas, because this case rested on the idea of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibiting discrimination on the basis of sex, and there are many laws that have similar language. The Federal Fair Housing Act, for instance, the Affordable Care Act. That language. So when you think of what the Trump administration did last Friday by trying to strip health care from trans folks and health insurance non-discrimination, that you think of the Affordable Care Act, which says in health care and health insurance you can't discriminate on the basis of sex. Well, there are brilliant legal minds. There are actually already cases in the works heading that way. That have already been, percolating through the federal court system. So definitely keep an eye on those. I won't hazard a guess as to what the impacts will be on all that of the Monday case, because bear in mind also I was expecting loss too. So don't take my word on reading court tea leaves.
Sure. Yeah, I just thought maybe you had some colleagues who were in the know and. You had an inside scoop.
I'll just say I read some tremendous legal advocates on Twitter. One who I recommend is Chase Strangio, who's an attorney at the ACLU. Just brilliant, legal knowledge. So definitely folks should check Chase out on Twitter and follow Chase's expertise. But I will say on the issue of the healthcare piece, since I brought it up, so the Trump administration issued their rule about opening the door for discrimination against trans folks last Friday. I will, applaud and I'll put something in the chat here. I applaud the Illinois Department of Insurance, because on Monday, the Illinois Department of Insurance posted a updated company bulletin reminding companies regulated under the Illinois Human Rights Act, the Illinois Insurance Code, other Illinois laws that, hey, if you're regulated under Illinois law, you can't discriminate in the provision of health insurance based on gender identity or sexual orientation. So it's great that the Illinois Department of Insurance put this out to remind the regulated industry, like, hey, you can't. And even in the very top of the company bulletin, it mentions what the administration did on Friday. So, so we're very grateful for the Department of Insurance for just putting out this clarifying statement that in Illinois, non-discrimination is the law.
Right.
I wanted to make sure I put that out there.
Well, thank you so much. And I will say that if I am elected, I look forward to working with Equality Illinois on the comprehensive, age-appropriate sex education bill that Equality Illinois is currently working on.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up. So we are with Planned Parenthood. We have a great coalition of organizations as well, working on a bill we're calling the REACH Act, which stands for Responsible Education for Adolescent and Children's Health, REACH Act. Very simply, we talked to a lot of stakeholders last year across the state. Last summer I visited with, LGBTQ youth in Carbondale. LGBTQ youth at the Phoenix Center in Springfield. We, Planned Parenthood and Equality Illinois, we convened a meeting with, 30 to 40 organizations who work with youth, who work in schools, provide affirmative, education, inclusive education. And we heard many things about how we can improve the current law in Illinois. And, really goes beyond, we think, sex ed to personal health and safety. Things, what are healthy relationships? Like how
Right.
young people want to learn about healthy relationships. They want to learn about consent. They want to learn about bullying. They want to learn, about healthy decision making. They want content that is LGBTQ inclusive, that is impactful. Content that doesn't stigmatize, young people who may be parenting or sexually active. But also what we've also heard, and there are serious deficiencies in the current law. One of the most prominent is this archaic provision that if a school teaches sex ed, they must teach honor and respect for heterosexual monogamous marriage. Clearly a provision that has been in the law for a long time.
Oh, okay.
Before marriage equality needs to come out of there because it's not of all families.
Right.
So what we also heard is some students weren't getting any kind of education in this space, and that's because the law does not require schools to teach this content.
Right.
It's optional for the school district. And then the second part of that is, if a school district teaches it, the guidelines are only for grades 6 through 12. But we also know that younger students want to learn about healthy decision making, and consent is so important. So what we've done is we've taken all we heard from stakeholders, from the youth in Springfield, from partners and organizations and folks across the state, and we did surveys and everything, and we wrote the REACH Act. And we introduced it in late February. We have amazing sponsors, Senator Ram Villavalam, Representative Kathleen Willis. And what it does is it modernizes the curricular standards, to make the content inclusive of diverse sexual orientations, gender identities, gender expressions. It doesn't stigmatize parenting or sexually active youth. It provides all the content we talked about that folks want. And significantly, it does two huge transformational changes. It requires public school districts to teach it, to provide this content to the youth, and it expands the grade levels in an age-appropriate way.
Right.
So that way, and the bill refers to K through 12. And what, in K through 2, the bill is very clear. It says in K through 2, you shall teach these basic 3 through 5, this, and then so forth. So it's really tiered towards those levels. And, in the lower grades, you learn about family structures. You learn about good touch, bad touch, things, and then, as the students age, then you will learn about healthy relationships, healthy decision-making. You will learn, as you get older into those grades 6 through 12, sexual health, but all done in an age-appropriate way. Culturally appropriate, comprehensive, inclusive, just we think a really transformational piece of legislation, and just really excited to be working on this with Planned Parenthood, a variety of other organizations, and we introduced the bill in late February, and of course COVID.
Yep.
But we're still working on it. We just, and I know you joined our panel earlier. Gosh, that was the
It was a couple weeks ago.
That was the end of May.
It's what it feels like. I don't know.
It feels like longer. So we had a panel, a really great panel with Representative Willis, Senator Villavalam, a young person from Carbondale talking about their experiences. The Illinois Coalition Against Sexual Assault talking about why it's important to provide, modernized content about sexual assault to young people. And Planned Parenthood, just a great panel we had. We've got a petition that we're working on, and we've had really productive conversations with a lot of stakeholders about ways we can improve the bill or make some good changes. So it's really exciting, and it's something that is top of our agenda. And when we can come back and the legislature is able to be fully operational, we intend to keep working on it and to push this bill. So I'm glad you brought it up. So thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm a certified teacher for OWL, Our Whole Lives, which is taught by Unitarian Universalist churches and United Church of Christ churches. And it's a very, very similar structure. We have classes for kindergarten and first grade, and then they have classes again when they're in 4th and 5th grade, and then again when they're in 7th and 8th grade, and then again in high school. And each, so, and it's, I've taught 4th and 5th grade, and it's so important to talk about consent, to talk about everything, all the possibilities, all the different ways of expressing care for other people, and to talk about those things before children go through puberty. Because if you go through puberty uninformed, that's where, unfortunately, young people are more susceptible to being preyed upon. If we teach about consent and we teach about privacy, and we teach about the mechanics of what happens and what are the consequences if you do this or that. So anyway, it's I think the legislation that is being proposed would be just transformative to our children and youth in the state of Illinois, and I hope again that Illinois can be a leader for the rest of the country in showing what a difference this kind of comprehensive education can make.
Yeah, exactly, and totally agree, and would love to have you as part of that fight.
I hope so.
I'll just say I put our petition with Planned Parenthood in the chat.
Oh, great.
So folks, if they want to, put their name on that, they can.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's a big piece of legislation we're looking at, continuing to work on. Just a few other things I can mention. We talked about the bill to get rid of the requirement to show a doctor's note for gender marker on birth certificates. We fully intend to bring that back up. Another bill that is not our piece of legislation, it's not our initiative, but we very much support it, and it's the Healthy Workplace Act. It's a bill to ensure that employees in Illinois have access to paid sick days every year to take care of their own healthcare needs or the healthcare needs of their family.
Sure.
And what's significant about this bill is the definition of family includes chosen.
Oh, very good.
As we know, for queer folks, who, because of stigma or ostracization from families into which we are born, we often develop chosen families, people who take care of us. And the definition of family member in the bill would include chosen families. So, as defined by the employee. So that's really exciting, and support that bill. And there's a great coalition. It's led by the amazing work of Women Employed, Shriver Center, our friends at the United Food and Commercial Workers Local 881, SEIU Healthcare, just a lot of great labor partners. And we're just proud to support that bill. So happy to support that. And then one other thing I want to mention, one other coalition that we're a part of that folks may be interested in is the Illinois HIV Action Alliance. It's a coalition of organizations, so Equality Illinois, AIDS Foundation of Chicago, Lambda Legal, ACLU, Howard Brown Health, Central Illinois Friends, HIV organization in Central Illinois, and many organizations, and we're growing the coalition, and we are evaluating the state's HIV criminalization law, which is a law in the books since 1980. late 80s. And it's a very stigmatizing law, and very, really leads to disparities. And, it treats HIV as a criminal issue when HIV is a public health concern, so
Right.
we need to treat HIV as a public health concern, not as a criminal issue. So we're a coalition. I encourage folks to look that up, Illinois HIV Action Alliance, and check it out. There's a website, and just learn a little more about the work of the coalition. But I did want to mention with that, and there's no bill this year about that, but we're doing education and outreach work right now. So yeah, Illinois HIV Action Alliance. So
yeah.
So that's just a couple of the things on the radar.
Great. So now I'll ask Kelsey if there's any questions from the Facebook Live.
Thanks, Carla. There are currently not any questions, but we've been keeping up with all of your links over in the Facebook Live as well. So those links you heard Mike share in the Zoom chat are also in the comment section of our live post there. A quick reminder, if you do have questions, feel free to post them. If you're in Zoom, in the chat or the Q&A, or if you're on Facebook Live, just underneath the live video. Thanks.
Okay. And I think at this time we could go ahead and get Jackie and Alex to join us. So they're in the Zoom as attendees. Oh, here they come. I'll wait till we can see their videos and hear them.
Oh.
Hello.
Hi. I don't know. Mike, do you know Jackie or Alex already from previous?
I don't think so, but I'm delighted to know them now. So.
Yes. So, Jackie, why don't I let you make introductions about what it is that you and Alex work on.
Okay, thank you so much for having me on another town hall with you. I think I was on one back in April. So this is exciting, and it's a pleasure to be here with you again. I am running for county board in McLean County. So Carla and I have been rubbing elbows, well, virtually during COVID, but on the campaign trail. So I'm excited to be a part of this. And I have my friend Alex Thomas here with me. And Alex has been a facilitator for the youth group that we co-lead together for the last few years. And so I'm going to let Alex explain what the youth group is and what it's all about.
Wonderful. Thanks. And thanks for joining us, Alex.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us. We are a group of youth, 13 to 19, and we meet weekly to provide all of the resources that the high schools, the middle schools don't provide for our youth. And we're really just a welcoming space for people to be themselves, to try out their new identities or to meet new friends that are like them. And really, we just want to come alongside them and support them with whatever needs they have.
Yes, so we just celebrated our 4th birthday, the youth group did.
Ooh, great.
So we were started through the Central Illinois Pride Health Center as a social group, and like Alex described, we try to meet the needs that they are unable to get met either at home or through the school or organizations that they participate in. And most of what we find is that they're looking for some of those resources, especially some of the ones you talked about, Mike. I'm going to touch on a few of them from the perspective of what we have learned from our youth. So we are currently meeting virtually. Obviously, we're not meeting in person, and we kind of have an ebb and flow of how many teenagers decide that Friday night they want to be on a Zoom call with us. And, you know, even when we meet in person, sometimes we have 2 kids and sometimes we have 20. We never know. So I want to talk a little bit about why we do what we do. So there's a ton of heartbreaking statistics out there. And I'm not going to dump them on this town hall. I don't want to be a party pooper. But I would encourage you, if you're curious, to look up the CDC statistics on LGBT youth. They have done several studies, and they're heartbreaking. They really are. But If you read them, you'll understand why we volunteer. And then I'll also encourage you to look up a recent study that was done by the Journal of Child and Psychiatric Nursing about the effect of just one supportive and caring adult in an LGBTQIA youth's life. And you will know why we give up our Friday nights to hang out with a bunch of teenagers that sometimes could not care less whether or not we have anything to say or not, but that they have a safe space and they have adults that they can reach out to when they're not safe, and know that we're going to help them find the resources that they need. So that one statistic for me cancels out all the other ones, because that an adult, or in our case two, or however many facilitators we have, can be the difference between life and death for some youth. So I'll let you do your own research on that. It's out there. You can CDC or the other one, which was the Journal of Child and Psychiatric Nursing. They're both recent studies and they're comprehensive. So they took a lot of youth statistics and put them out there, and they're eye-opening. So you can do that on your own. We have worked closely with the Illinois Safe School Alliance through the whole journey. Yeah, they're amazing. Through the whole journey of our youth group, and they have been great to help us understand how to best support our youth. They've been especially helpful to me over the years when I have taken on our local school districts on behalf of our youth experiencing issues at school. So there have been several times where our youth have disclosed to us a thing that's happening at their school that they don't feel confident in approaching themselves, or they don't know what their rights are, or they do and they're not being heard. And so I'm an abrasive person, so I just happily waltz in with my statistics and my help from this Illinois Safe School Alliance. So the fun part about Safe School Alliance is they want to be a catalyst for change, and they want to support school districts in doing the right things. So they want to help them be on the right side of history. And so usually when I first come in, I'm like, let me just get you hooked up with the Illinois Safe School Alliance. They want you to be successful. They don't want you to be, those certain school districts you've heard from. And then when they don't listen to me, the fun part about Illinois Safe School Alliance is that they'll get on the other side of it with me, and then they'll say, actually, we're going to take you to court, or actually, we're going to now be against you. And so that's been amazing, because it's empowered me to say, like, first you could do this, or also there's this. And luckily our local school districts have been willing to hear me, and they've become very familiar with my name and my face. Like, you'll remember me from the last time I was here for this exact same reason. And usually they're ready to listen at that point. We don't have to go through all the old stuff. So we do work closely with them, and I will drop the link in a second. But IllinoisSafeSchools.org is a great resource, and you can learn so much there. They have a ton of great resources, and they're just really willing to walk alongside you and support you, and they have been instrumental. The other cool thing about Illinois Safe School Alliance is that they are very youth-focused in their leadership, in that youth should be leading the way on this, not a bunch of adults getting in the way thinking we know what they want, which is amazing, and has helped us change kind of the dynamic within our group, because we are a bunch of adults who have already experienced a lot of life. We don't need, it's not for us, it's for them. So we have learned a lot from them, and they've been super great with us learning how to be best for our youth. There was a great partnership between the ACLU, and Mike, I know you mentioned them several times, and Safe Schools, where they created some helpful resource guides. One especially is the one called You Have the Right to Be Yourself. And you can find it through the Illinois Safe School Alliance website. And they have several breakdowns of different workshops you can do. And then they have it broke down into nice little like infographic type comics. And they have several different things about youth organizing. But the one I really want to talk about, and Mike already mentioned it a little bit, is specifically the sexual health and wellness workshop. And so it gives you statistics of what is allowed and what is not allowed, and what you can consent to and what your parents have to consent to, or if you're in the DCFS system, how that works. And so it's really great because it's broke down in a really easy to digest way. And I have a screenshot of it that I can share as well, of just one specific slide that we're going to talk about later. But they pair, this is what you can do and this is what you can't do, and here's how you find out more information, with comics, and it's just really easy to digest. So the sexual health and wellness workshop one has been like in my back pocket as something that when I am addressing our school districts on some of their non-inclusive policies and lowercase policies, which are, you know, different than the uppercase policies, which is what's written in the book, versus what actually happens, what's actually the practice, you know, policy with a lower p. And typically when you remind them of the policy with the capital P, usually the lowercase p one comes along. So Mike, I loved hearing all of the updates on some of the stuff that I can use as fuel the next time I have to go talk to our local school district. And I love the Reach Act. I can't wait to share that with some of our youth. We have talked a lot in our group, and we've done a lot of investigating and a lot of discussion around the sex ed law in Illinois. And I just want to say it again because I know when I heard it, it really messed me up. And Mike, you already said it, but I'm going to say it again. The Illinois state law says that if you teach it, it must honor heterosexual monogamous marriage. There's just so many things wrong with that sentence. Like lots of levels of no thank you all in one. And so for me, I was blown away when I learned that that was there. So I'm so glad that that's a part of, like, we got to get rid of that. And in Illinois, legal marriage, same-sex marriage has been legal for over 5 years, right? Like, are we done with that yet? Can we maybe move on from this archaic law? Why is that there? So, and our kids were also like, I'm sorry, what? But there's also no explicit requirement that they have to teach it anyway. So you mentioned that too, like, what? It's 2020. It should be required. Everyone needs to know this. And the other thing is, our youth have really indicated to us that they do not see themselves reflected in their sexual education or the health care they've received across the board. And we have kids that come to us from all over McLean County and a couple from Woodford County. So, I mean, we kind of have a range, and across the board, either they were not taught it, because some of them were not taught it at all, or it wasn't reflective of who they are. They don't see themselves reflected in that. And that their teachers are not equipped when they ask questions specific to trying to see themselves reflected. It's not just that the teachers are being intentionally non-inclusive. They don't have the tools and resources to answer those questions. So we regularly have Planned Parenthood, Central Illinois Friends, and YWCA Stepping Stone. So you mentioned at least 2 of those, Mike, which is great. They visit our group regularly, and they help us bridge that gap for what the public schools and our youth, what their parents are not currently providing. And so they talk about consent. They talk about, hey, did you know this about your body? Regardless of how you identify on the gender spectrum, there are ways in which you can have sex ed that matches who you are, and that you can do it safely. And here's all these resources. And I remember the first time we did it, it was just like, they were mortified. They're just like melting into the couch, like, oh, yeah, talk about this. Since then, they've been back several times, and they are always, when we always offer, like, if you want to submit questions ahead of time, like, I have no filter. I will not be embarrassed. I will ask your questions for you, but I want you to get them answered. And so initially they were like, no questions. And slowly but surely, as we've had them back, we've gotten better questions, and even kids who are willing to ask them themselves and are like empowering themselves, which is great. It's very different from the first time we had them. And so we're super excited that Planned Parenthood is working on this, because they have gone out of their way to come and help our youth. And our youth is small. That our youth are hearing it for the first time when we've intentionally brought it to them, and none of their peers are hearing it unless they're there. So that is a huge one, and I could talk for hours and hours on it, but I won't. I'm just so glad, and I'm going to be sharing the crap out of that REACH Act petition, and everybody I know is going to have to sign it in front of me, so I know that it's going through. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for all of the work that you've done, and you reflected on. The inclusive curriculum is amazing, and so I thank you, Mike, for all of the work that you've done and your coalitions for all of these important subjects. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah. I want to say just thank you, Jackie. Thank you for everything that you just said. I love everything you've just talked about and all the work. And, we'll be happy to connect you with some more information. So, Carla, if you'll all connect Alex and I later on. I did want to say one more thing off topic of everything you said, but you're running for county board. Is that correct?
I am.
It ran for Sangamon County Board in 2012. So down in Springfield. So I applaud you putting yourself out there in the public space like that. So good for you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm hoping to have a little rainbow wave in McLean County. We've got several queer candidates that are openly queer. Carla running for Illinois, and 2 county board candidates. So we'll have our tiny little rainbow wave in McLean County in November. All right, and Alex has some other information that we have been bouncing around between us that I want to share as well.
So in regards to birth control that's accessible to youth 12 and up, 12 to 17, minor youth, that they have access to birth control without consent and without notification of parents. What we would love to see for our youth that are trans would be something similar with regards to hormone blockers. So not necessarily to start hormones. I understand the need to wait until you're legal adult to actually do hormone therapy, but to stop the process of an incorrect chemical change in your body before it happens, and to give our youth extra time to figure out who they are, figure out what they need from society, from themselves, from their medical providers, and to say, hey, I know myself, I'm going to go ahead and start hormones, or hey, my mind changed, I'm going to go ahead and let my natural puberty take effect, and I'm going to come off hormone blockers naturally. We know that hormone blockers are successful. They've been around for a very long time to treat naturally occurring conditions like pre-puberty that engages too quickly. So we know that they work, that they're safe, that you can have a regular puberty after you come off of them, and they're not going to be detrimental to our youth. So I would love to see that happen. I know it's radical. I know a lot of people would question, what's the point, or can we really take that consent from parents? But I would say absolutely, especially with those statistics Jackie was talking about. Just giving someone their body to match their identity and just say, hey, I'm going to put this on pause for a little while until I can take care of it, would be huge. So I'd love to see it happen. I'd love to see a push for it. I don't think there is a push for it at this time, but it's definitely something that our youth have discussed a dissatisfaction with, having to wait on parents, having to wait to have that autonomy given to them, even though it shouldn't be innate and inherent. So yeah, that's definitely something else that we would love to see.
One of the screenshots that I talked about that I shared or I saved from that specific resource from Illinois Safe School was one specifically around hormones. And on the left side, it talks about hormones. Yeah,
There you go.
Kelsey, man, you're just on it. She's great.
Yes, she
On
is.
the left, it talks about hormones and that you must be the age of 18. All guardians must consent if you're under 18, all of these things about hormones, right? And on the right side, it talks about pregnancy tests and it talks about birth control. And you know that birth control is usually also hormones. As someone who has had a lot of contact with my gynecologist based on some medical issues that I had bodily autonomy over, all of the things that we tried were birth control, and all of the issues that I had were related to the hormones from the birth control. So as you can see, that without parental consent, there are some guidelines that let you access birth control under the age of 18. But then over here on the left, it says hormones, no. And so maybe, like Alex said, we do keep the actual hormone replacement therapy in these guidelines, but maybe the blockers could be its own category that could be added to this page. That then gives our youth access to maybe experience less body dysphoria, and then maybe causes less issues down the road that they then have to seek medical attention for and potentially seek other resources and help for. So that's a thing that we talk about a lot, and it's not something a lot of people want to talk about with us. So we're so glad that both of you are just like, oh yeah, this is totally normal to talk about. So we appreciate that.
Yeah.
Hopefully we didn't scare all your Facebook viewers away, Carla.
You know, it's Pride Month. This is the perfect month for us to talk about queer issues.
Right.
And yeah, and my understanding is that at the moment, if you are a minor who is experiencing gender dysphoria and wants to have medical treatment of any kind, that you have to go to Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago. I don't know if that's my understanding. So that's something.
My current understanding, I think Howard Brown also has resources for under, but it all of that still requires parental consent. So those are options. And I know Howard Brown was partnering with Advocate Broman in Normal before it changed hands to Carl. And I don't know currently what's happening with that, but they were working to provide more LGBT specific healthcare here in McLean County, but I don't know what's happened with that since it's changed hands. I don't know if that's still a thing. So currently there's not a place for minors to receive that kind of care in McLean County, and not near here either. Over 18, they can go to Planned Parenthood, and I know a lot of our youth have been very blessed by our Planned Parenthood, but that's also one of those things that until they are 18, they can't access that even with consent.
Right. And it's good for me to hear all this and to to learn about it and chat with you more about it. As you talk about minors, one thing I did think of, and it's a little different, it's a little separate, but there was so you're both, all familiar with PrEP, of course. So there was a law that was passed last year under the leadership of the AIDS Foundation of Chicago to the law about minors being able to access the treatment and to be diagnosed and to be treated for an STI without consent, to consent to that care with yeah, you know what I'm trying to say. But from my understanding, the law wasn't clear that a provider could give care to a young person, a minor, without parental consent for the prevention of an STI. So And the AIDS Foundation of Chicago worked on legislation last year that's now the law. It clarified that providers can provide preventative care for STIs, which is, of course, is separate from what we were just talking about. But I did want to mention that. So providers can provide preventative care like PrEP, but also like HPV vaccine to minors, irrespective of parental consent. And the debate on that was really interesting because some legislators just couldn't understand why a young person, would want to get that, why a parent should not have to consent. And they couldn't understand that, about homeless LGBTQ youth. And we know the statistics, on that, on the number of youth who identify as LGBTQ, or the fact that maybe a young person can't confide in their parents because of hostility and stigma, should still be able to get the care they need. So I did want to mention that there's the law that clarifies that youth can consent to receiving preventative care for STIs, which is not the same thing we were just talking about, but I thought of that when as we talked about this. So
I think that's important too. And when we talk about the statistics, that I'm not going to rain on this parade, but statistic that really sticks out to me is the disproportionate amount of LGBT youth in the foster care system and the DCFS system. And a few years ago, I was able to present at a youth-led conference where they specifically asked for LGBT resources. And what I heard loud and clear is the homes that I'm placed in are not equipped to answer my questions or to support me through this time in my life when I have a lot of questions about my identity and about my needs. And that has always really stuck with me, because whenever I see those heartbreaking statistics, the first thing I look for are what those numbers look like for kids in the care of DCFS. And I just think of those youth telling me to my face, hey, I don't have the resources, or the people I'm placed with do not have the capacity to support me through this. And so those youth would fall absolutely into what you were saying about having access to those things when their parents don't have the ability to support that, or even know. Some of them might not even know that those things exist.
Right.
So that's a super important piece of that, is those youth or the homeless youth, like you were saying, like, well, they don't have to agree to that.
Exactly.
So thank you for bringing that up.
So it sounds like we need more queer and queer supportive people to be foster carers. And I already, as a candidate, am interested in some issues with DCFS that need to be looked at. And thank you, Jackie, for reminding me, because I know we've talked about this before, but reminding me that we need to make sure that DCFS is taking care with our queer youth, so that they do not become one of those statistics that we don't want to talk about, but we know exists all too often. Kelsey, are there any questions on Facebook?
Hey everyone, thank you so much for sharing all of your work and being just amazing people. There currently are not any questions, but again, we've been dropping those links. So if you do have questions, or if you want to follow up, feel free to post on that Facebook Live, and we will get back to you.
Okay.
We've just answered all the questions. We're that, so that good.
Yeah. Well, I didn't have any more questions that I'd written down. I just, because it is Pride Month, Mike, I wanted to ask, is Equality Illinois doing something to celebrate Pride, or is Equality actually doing an online Pride that we should be aware of?
We are actually. That's a great question, and it's actually this Saturday. So we're really excited to be broadcasting through our YouTube channel, and it's a small dollar fundraising event to support our advocacy work.
Mhm.
The advocacy work still goes on. And you heard all the things we're working on, but there's also a lot of electoral work we're going to be doing, because election coming up, if we all didn't know, and a really important election, and the governor just signed a really important bill, about elections.
Right. Yes.
So back to Pride, there is, we're really excited to do what we think is the first ever statewide Pride event. And we call it a statewide Pride because our program that we're going to be broadcasting includes community conversations with advocates from across the state. So we've talked to advocates in Carbondale. We've got community conversations with our advocates in Quad Cities, Peoria. We've talked to some folks from the Prairie Pride Coalition in Bloomington.
Right.
The Phoenix Center in Springfield, which is near and dear to my heart. Our great advocates in Champaign, Chicago. So we've got community conversations. Our program is also going to include a storytime hour, which will include First Lady M.K. Pritzker reading a story as part of the program. Really excited to have that. It will include about an hour of mixology and cooking from an LGBTQ chef and an LGBTQ bartender. It will have some community conversations with folks like U.S. Senator Tammy Baldwin, who's the first openly LGBTQ member of the U.S. Senate, a lesbian from our state to the north, Wisconsin. Mayor Pete Buttigieg will be part of the conversation.
Nice.
And there'll be a release party with great music as part of the program. It'll start with an interfaith service with some of our amazing friends from the Peoria faith community. There's more, and there'll be pop-in messages throughout from, our pro-equality members of Congress and from some pro-equality statewide elected officials. So really just a great program that elevates, the diversity of the community across the state, that elevates voices across the state. And we're really excited for it. And if you're interested, just go to the Equality Illinois website, eqil.org, and you'll find information there about it. And we call it the, Can't Stop Our Pride, One Day, One Illinois. And it's this coming Saturday. So
Great. Well, I also have an event this coming Saturday. I don't know if they're going to overlap.
Remind me, what time is yours?
Mine's at 6 o'clock.
They will not overlap. Ours is like 12:05. So
Okay. So at 6 o'clock, I'm having a queer history trivia night, and Barb Dallinger, who works at ISU and works with I can't remember her the Acorn.
The Acorn Equality Fund.
Yes, Acorn Equality Fund. Thank you, Jackie.
I'm a recipient of one of their scholarships, so it's very near and dear to my heart.
Yes. Anyway, so Barb Dallinger has curated the questions for us, and we're going to try something very daring technology-wise, I suppose. We're going to try and simulcast our event at the bistro. So people at the bistro can either buy a ticket and get the link and play on their phones, and if you do buy a ticket, then you can be scored and win my prize package. Or if you're just showing up at the bistro just to hang out and drink, we'll have paper and pen for you to just play just for fun. So that's on my Facebook page and on my website, which is unite88.org. And I welcome you to come and play trivia with me. And one more thing before we sign off, I didn't prep you for this question, Mike, but do you know how many queer candidates we have running in the state of Illinois? Do you know the number?
Oh gosh, I should have expected that question.
I'm sorry.
It's before the primary. It was around 15 or 16 running
Okay.
for the state legislature. You know,
Right.
running for the state legislature. Some of them did not make it through the primary.
Right.
But having 14, 15, LGBTQ candidates running, that's pretty significant. And
Yes.
and 5 of them, of course, are our incumbent state reps. Greg Harris, or Illinois House Majority Leader Kelly Cassidy, Lamont Robinson, Sam Yingling, Yoni Pizer, but then also folks like yourself, and then up in the Wheaton area in DuPage County, Ken Mejia Beal, running, and just there are some others. I don't have the list right in front of me.
Yeah, no, that's.
But it's and beyond the state legislative candidates, there are many other candidates at all levels of government. One who I really want to point out, her name is Jill Rose Quinn, and Jill is running for a Cook County judge spot. And Jill won her primary in March for the primary for the judges race. And when Jill wins in November, because she's unopposed in November, when she wins in November, she will be the first openly trans judge in Illinois.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for, I'm glad I prompted this part of the conversation so that you could share that. I just wanted to, just as a point of pride, to where we're at in 2020, in spite of, the global pandemic and in spite of things coming from the executive administration, we still have things to be proud of. And I'm proud that I'm living in Illinois where I can feel comfortable being out as a candidate. We'll see if that helps me or if it hurts me, but it's important. It's important to be your authentic self when you're running for office. And I thank you so much to Equality Illinois for my endorsement. They only you only endorse at the state level, right? Or judges, not at the county level necessarily.
Oh no, we do. So at the our primary focus as an organization is always going to be the state legislature, because that is where we make the most change that impacts the most people in the state. But we don't endorse in federal elections. We don't engage in Congress or U.S. Senate, and we don't really engage in we don't engage in judicial races. We don't make endorsements in judicial races. But we do, in the past, we've endorsed in county races, we've endorsed in school board races, and what I'll just say the criteria when we look at those races are one of the exact things you said, like ensuring representation, getting more LGBTQ folks elected to public office. And we can never say enough how important school board elections are. Jackie, you talked about school boards, how important school board elections are, how important city council elections are, board elections, that visibility, that representation. So we will take action in county races, in local, in other local races, because we want to elevate we want to elevate queer people, and give you an opportunity. I will also say, since we're on the topic, there is a national organization called Victory Fund. Victory Fund. So I see you're both nodding.
I've made my application.
Yeah, great. Victory Fund is a national political organization that identifies, trains, endorses, supports LGBTQ people, and it's LGBTQ only, for office. So, you'll see them endorsing Mayor Pete for president. You'll see them endorsing Tammy Baldwin for U.S. Senator. And you'll see them endorsing folks for Congress, for state rep, state senate, county board, village office, because they have the philosophy of like more LGBT people, and they're national. So whereas we are, we like to focus on the land of Lincoln,
Mm-hmm.
and build, as we say, a better Illinois. So.
Right. Well, thank you so much for helping us to build a better Illinois. And Jackie and Alex and I are so blessed to live in this state where we have your advocacy, and we already have a really good foundation of important protective measures for our residents. All right, Kelsey, one last ask if there's any questions, and then we can say goodnight and happy Pride.
Thanks, Carla. There are not any additional questions at this time. But again, thank you all so much for being on the panel tonight. And yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, so we'll end the Facebook Live. Thanks and happy Pride, everybody.